All
We're
right,
up and
great.
running.
So, my good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I will be presenting my research entitled "There Are Plenty of Other Olympians," which was an exploratory research on post-Olympic transitions of Jamaican track and field athletes. Now, the reason behind it, or the rationale for even attempting this research, was because part of my job includes research, and I actually love the researching component in addition to teaching and consultation. So, an Olympian said, I think you should research what happens to national athletes after they return home without a medal, right? So, the whole focus was really about those who had returned without. And so, I designed the research on focusing on not just athletes who returned without, but those who also returned with medals. And of course, given the fact that I am from a culture where our expectations of athletes um, mostly include winning once they represent us on the national scene. And of course, um, what were some of the reception upon their return. The literature review was extensive. I looked at literature from various research that included Orient 2021, Howells and Lucassen 2021, and they looked at not just Olympians who returned without medals, but who returned without. And so that research was very interesting. Also, I looked at research from my own my previous research in terms of understanding and exploring the culture of sport and winning in Jamaica even further. I also looked at depressive symptoms that were from research done by researchers in Europe and North America, looking also at reactions and post transitions of Olympians who returned with medals. Because many times we would think that persons who Olympians who return without medals are more predisposed to having depressive symptoms, but the literature also suggested that persons who returned with medals also experience depressive symptoms and adjusting to various emotional, regulating emotions after returning from a great high and then adjusting to an immediate low for some. And not only that, maintaining success can lead to some of those. So the literature was very interesting. I also want to mention literature complete done that was retrieved from the International Olympic Committee, looking at different programs and interventions that have been put in place for Olympians after they return to their respective countries. So this was an exploratory research, as I suggested. So the main research objectives were exploring the goals of athletes prior to their arrival at an Olympic event. And also, I wanted to find out and assess their awareness of the country's expectations of them while they're actually at the event, and perceptions of expected support upon their return with or without a medal, and general experiences when they return home. So the research design was primarily a qualitative one. I will be showing you a few graphs, and it's not a mixed method, but it's just to highlight the demographics of the population. Purposive sampling was used to select 9 Olympians who represented Jamaican track and field. And I need to have us understand that only persons who faced the starter are considered Olympians. So even if they went as a reserve, they were not interviewed because they did not face the starter. So only if you face the starter were you eligible to be interviewed. And of course, even though it was a purposive sampling, it ended up translating into a snowballing technique because I had to find out from some Olympians of other people that they knew who would have been interested in participating in this research. It was a semi-structured interviews were done um, over a 6-month period, and I did Zoom interviews which were transcribed and then analyzed to find emerging themes and using the constant comparative method. So the research analysis was done using Brown and Clark's 2006 thematic analysis approach. And of course, the data was analyzed using NViva software where respondents' views emerge in the form of major themes leading to sub-themes by initial codes. During the data analysis, a codebook was generated, followed by the project maps in the software. To ensure trustworthiness of procedures, member checks were also employed. And of course, needless to say, this is the grounded theory approach. All right, so demographics of participants. So the majority of the participants were females. So I'm going into the findings real quickly. With 67% of the sample being females and 33% being males. And the participants of this research range from athletes who had competed in the 1972 Olympics to the 2020 Olympics, which was held in 2021 due to the pandemic COVID-19. And again, some of the participants won all 3 categories, and there were those who did not win any medal at all. So I was fortunate as the researcher to interview Olympians who had won either gold, silver, or bronze medals, and of course, those who didn't win any at all. And the um, the different events that they competed in range from 100-meter, 200-meter, mostly track and field Olympians. Well, only track and field Olympians, 400, 4x1 relays, 4x4 relays, 400-meter hurdles, and discus. All right, so I really wanted to explore, sorry about that. This should have been earlier, but part of the exploration would have been to find out to what extent Olympians receive support when they returned without a medal, and to what extent did they receive support if they returned with a medal, so it's with and without, and of course, how does the culture help to prepare Olympians for whether they embrace or abandon them depending on their performance outcome? And what role, of course, does culture play in the expectations that they have of themselves versus the ones the Jamaican population have of them, and how did their personal attainment versus that of the country impact how they experience the overall Olympics, and what recommendations did they find as tangible and intangible forms of appreciation that they wanted to receive when they return home. And from that, there were 16 major themes, and I will not be presenting all 16. I'm just going to be going through some of them. So one major finding included perception of Olympians returning to Jamaica with a medal. And of course, as we can see here, for some, it was a proud moment. It was an opportunity to advance in their career. It's meant to them being known, being praised and celebrated. For some, they noted that it was not just a perception, but they had a welcoming reception from the population and they felt confident to return home. And these are some of the direct quotes. In terms of returning home confidently, I can be myself and confidently show people who I am. It was a proud moment for some, means that it was a very proud moment for me, representing myself, my family, and my country at a high level. Celebrated with other medalists. So even though they returned without a medal, sorry, with a medal. They were celebrated with other medalists, um, but yet some persons experience personal feelings of disappointment. So I disappointed Jamaica, and that was a low for me, even when we were doing the parade. So this is them coming home. And by the way, this was a medalist, but it wasn't the kind of medal that they wanted. I was sitting at the back of the truck, and it's like I'm happy, but I am not. My mind kept going back, and a lot of people were saying to me, "Yo, X, Y, and Z, you never get it this time, but we with you." So I knew it meant a lot to them. And never get it is representative, obviously, of the gold medal, but this quote is from a medalist. Also, another major theme that emerged was the cultural climate towards athletes who returned to Jamaica without a medal. And some of the quotes were they expected to be applauded for reaching the highest level of international competition. They were also celebrated with other medalists. They expected to be celebrated with other medalists, sorry, and public expression of disappointment, unwelcoming and poor treatment, encouraged to train harder, understanding only towards junior athletes who return without a medal. And I have a quote here that says, "In junior days, it didn't matter if you came back without a medal. You have persons at the airport surrounding you, shaking your hand, wanting to take pictures with you. But when you reach a senior level, to see that you're an Olympian, you made the finals, and people are looking at the medalist, it takes a toll on you. You say to yourself, wow, for Jamaica to really recognize me, I have to medal. Making the finals is not enough for Jamaica. It's good enough for you." So as I move throughout, so that was a quote about how an Olympian felt in terms of the reception that was received when they returned home without a medal. And clearly, I want us to note that acknowledgement, in their view, was given to junior athletes, and um, so they were accustomed to, even if they didn't win, um, as a junior, their reception was better. But when you're at the senior level, that's completely different. And then some life changes um, after competing in an Olympics. These were noted. So life changes was another major theme. So one of them included, some of the codes included being shamed for the first time after returning without a medal. So this is something that they had to get used to, because this was a first time experience for some of them. Learning to be careful with the media, keeping close to a small circle of friends, dealing with increased media attention, more social responsibility. Now they realize that persons are recognizing their names, so there is name recognition. For some, they said they had, and remember, I would have interviewed Olympians from 1972 to 2020. So there was no monetary benefit for them, no real change. I'm not saying that was for that group of people. I'm just saying, just bear in mind the type of Olympians that were interviewed. Some said no real change. They were offered professional contracts, and I'm not seeing all of this slide. All right, thank you. And adjusting to celebrity status, receiving special treatment, and their lives changed, as some of them noted that they had a greater spiritual awareness. And these are some of the quotes. So, celebrity life status. My life changed somewhat. Well, I got a lot more popular. Olympic medalists become celebrities, so to speak. It changed in terms of that aspect. That was basically it for me in Jamaica at the time. you just became a celebrity. That's basically it. And as I mentioned earlier, some said that they had more responsibilities. And this is a quote. I think I have more responsibilities as young ones look up to me as a role model. Increased media attention. Here we see, not seeing all of the slide, but I won a few titles. 1 second. Right. I won a few titles. And so I was always in the media, but after the Olympics, I do get a lot of media calls. So there is increased media attention. And finally, I am just going to choose to look at a theme that was specifically asked in terms of the recommendations for future Olympians. So they wanted future Olympians to demand basic coaching and medical support. They encourage them to be humble and patient, do your best, do not be defined by your past performance, focus on your goals, get an education, develop non sport skills, make your mental health a priority, seek financial management advice, seek mentors, and know when to stop and retire and move on. And here are some of the quotes. Remain humble, be humble and patient, as the saying goes. Today for me, tomorrow for you. Track and field can be an unforgiving sport. Working to get to the top, it takes a lot of work, but staying at the top takes a lot more work. And a recommendation again was get formal training, try to get an education, and be sure to go to school just in case track does not work for you. You have something to fall back on. Try to help others. I think if you find yourself in a situation where you can encourage the younger ones coming up, try to encourage them and try to tell them to understand that they're going to be good times and they're going to be bad times, but it's okay. Dust it off and step up. And I'm going to conclude with these are some of the conclusions. The participants suggested various ways in which the government could support national athletes, and this is an extensive research. And so I have various types of support that they have requested and suggested in terms of those who represent the country at Olympics, whether they return with or without a medal. They desired new policies and greater financial support to aid in the preparation for the next 4 years. And of no less significance was being emotionally aware of the challenges and disappointments they encountered. And if they did not achieve their goals, they pleaded with the nation to be less critical and more supportive. And of course, they emphatically suggested remaining humble and developing other types of training skills. In fact, every single participant of this research highly recommended the importance of education and other types of training in terms of skill development. And of course, while I did not look at in great detail depression, there were some depressive symptoms that were noted mostly from non-medalists. So this is also contrary to some of the literature, which suggests that it's depressive symptoms were noted in medalists. That was not found in this research. The depressive symptoms came from those who did not medal, such as withdrawal and prolonged feelings of worthlessness, inappropriate guilt, and excessive fatigue were some of the things that were mentioned. And of course, there was actually an incident at one of the games where Olympians in 1972 could vividly recall things that happened where they just needed to return home because of safety issues, and there was no psychological or emotional support provided to help them to deal with some of the trauma they had experienced at that Olympics. And of course, research of this nature concludes by highlighting the importance of providing immediate care and appropriate intervention programs, along with financial aid to ensure that those extremely gifted and talented individuals who represent the country at the highest level receive the necessary support they deserve. And as was similar to other research and recommendation coming from the IOC, a hybrid intervention program involving past and current Olympians should be implemented, which includes coaches, sports psychologists, government, non government agencies. And this was recommended to help them to deal with the various post Olympic transitions that they may or may not encounter. And these are some of the list of references. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Rose. A very interesting study providing perspectives that oftentimes we don't even think about once the athletes are finished, once they have represented us in the Olympic Games. That's it. But giving perspective from the athlete regarding their experiences and how it impacts them is a very, very interesting take. Listening to one particular section, I can note that athletes train very, very hard to get to the Olympic Games. And you mentioned, I think it was in the literature review, that depressive symptoms occur in athletes who medal and athletes who
Correct.
did not medal. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you have any comment on why athletes who medal would express any form of depressive symptom.
Okay, and I'm really happy that you asked that question because that was a shocker. Well, not a shocker, but it was interesting to note because we know that success maintenance is not as easy as people imagine it. And again, it's based on the heightened emotional arousal that takes place at an event such as the Olympics. It's a great high, and there has to be some form of, it's like, it's also in the literature, it was akin to like giving birth, a high moment, and then um, after that moment, then what? So similarly, athletes who also win gold medals experienced depressive symptoms in terms of adjusting to sometimes the mundane life that will happen sometimes immediately or not immediately because there's a lot of media attention surrounding the gold medalists especially, but just adjusting to and now preparing for the next 4 years um, that was mentioned in the literature, especially by Williams and Howells.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for that. And before I go to the next two questions that I have, persons who are listening, if you have any questions, please type it in the chat, and we will address them shortly. All right. So the next question that popped up for me um, regarding the presentation is that one of the outcomes uh, post the Olympic Games
Mm-hmm.
is that when athletes experience failure, some of these athletes you indicated are encouraged to train harder. Are there any other variables associated with the athletes who indicated that they are encouraged to train harder versus those who may express depressive symptoms?
Well, I think the encouragement to train harder, especially in the context that it was provided, was mostly looking at it was like a form of encouragement in terms of don't give up because it's gonna happen. So it's not like keep at it in an obsessive way, but more like it didn't happen this time, but let's train harder. However, even with the medalists, remember there are different types of medals. And even when we all know to be a medalist, it's a big deal, but culturally we only mostly recognize the gold medal. So it could be in the instance of a silver medalist, say somebody encouraging them, or because this was them quoting what people would be telling them, to train harder and so on. it would be a form of encouragement in that seen as do not give up now.
Hmm.
But let me also add, part of the recommendations coming from these same Olympians was to know when to stop and know when to retire. Okay, so it wasn't just said in, it's based again on how much um people consider that they have left in the tank and so on. So it could be their first Olympics, and therefore, if they didn't medal or didn't get the type of medal that they wanted, they were encouraged to train harder.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Um, Currently, we have persons like yourself who are sports psychologists who would be able to provide mental support to current athletes. Um, were you able to determine any differences in the perspectives of athletes who competed in 1972 versus athletes who compete 2020, right? Are there any differences in the resilience that you would observe? I know this is a qualitative study, so you don't have like
I
you know
don't have those numbers, but what I can tell you is that in terms of, and I would not have those numbers, what I would tell you is that there, there was, in terms of their resilience, both groups, all groups, whether it was from 1972 to 2020, happening in 2021, um, they displayed and showed a lot of resilience be- before qualifying, because I asked, and we looked, because there were 16 major themes from this, right? So we looked at their perception before um, their qualification, upon hearing that they've qualified, and then their actual um, performance at the event. And it would have, for them to make it through the different rounds, for them to qualify, it has to be, we have to note resilience coming out right there. And then, of course, to represent the country during the different heats and semis and finals and medaling, um, at any period in time, that's great resilience. And it was evident in all groups, and would be considered a key characteristic of the Olympians who represent the country.
Mhm.
However, I must highlight though that there was no psychological support provided for Olympians who would have represented in the earlier periods versus now.
Mhm.
Well, let me say no formal psychological support, because maybe they got psychological support in various ways.
Yeah, yeah, informally. All right. I have a few questions here. Why did athletes recommend more coaching as a solution?
Okay, so I think the ones who recommended more coaching, I think mostly to also financial support to pay the coaches as well, because they're gonna be preparing for the next 4 years. But those who recommended more coaching as a solution would have been some of the earlier athletes who felt that, who had to, who were not necessarily professional athletes, so they were participating, but some of them also didn't even live here, so returning home was not really until Christmas or so on, and so their coaches were overseas. So I think a recommendation from that group of people would be definitely having more coaching, and in a more insulated manner than them having to multitask, be student, be working, and so forth. So that was where that came from
Hmm. Hmm.
mostly.
Okay, okay, all right. And I have another question here from Ms. Sharp. What would need to be done to get the recommended intervention program implemented?
Okay, so similar to the literature from other parts of the world, it's a hybrid approach that needs to take place when we're going to look at providing Olympians with immediate support upon their return after an Olympics. And that would include all hands on deck, and a myriad of sport professionals, including past Olympians so that the program is more connecting and relating to the needs of the Olympians.
Okay, thank you. And another point that I want to emphasize, especially to persons who are watching, maybe student athletes are watching, one of the recommendations from the participants in this study was the need for an education. So a lot of them expressed that you need to
Every one
have
of them.
every one of them that you
Yes.
need to have in case track and field doesn't work out, in case your sporting activity doesn't work out, in case you get an injury and you're not able to participate, um, uh, also post retirement, you need to have some backup plan. And just a plug here, the Faculty of Sport is here for you. And the, the fact that you're an athlete means that your specific interest is sport. So studying something along that line would be most interesting for you. I'm
And
seeing another
please,
question.
I want you to elaborate on the program, sir, because the Olympians did mention that not every Olympian can be a coach. These are direct quotes that I'm remembering from my different interviews. And so I want to also highlight that the Faculty of Sport provides other training opportunities for persons to be not just coaches, but we have a wide range of sport programs. And Dr. Facey will tell you some more about those programs.
Yes, just let me do a quick plug. So we have the BSc in sport coaching, BSc in sport kinetics. We have a wide variety of MSc programs. So persons who already have degrees. We have the MSc Sport Business Management with various disciplines. We have the MPhil PhD in sport. And if you have an interest in sport law, sport business management, sport economics, sport and biomechanics, etc., you can create a proposal, a research proposal, and target any specific discipline that is of interest to you. And I'm seeing one of our PhD candidates here in the chat as well. And several programs, master's programs, endless. You can visit our Faculty of Sport website, and you can get downloaded brochures regarding all the programs, and you'll have all the information there. All right. So before I get any further into that, let me highlight another question here from John. Do you
Mhm.
feel the findings are similar to athletes' perspectives in other countries? And this is a very important question, as at times qualitative study can be very targeted into one specific location. So John wants to know if this is if this is the same or similar based on other studies that you would have looked at in your literature review.
Well, I thank you for that question, John. So there were similarities and differences in terms of what Olympians in other parts of the world experience. I only looked at a small number of our Olympians. Um, in terms of what was mentioned earlier that Dr. Facey had asked um, regarding how our the literature suggests in other parts of the world that medalists can experience depressive symptoms. That was a difference in this particular study because no medalist was mentioned any form of depressive symptom. It was any form of depressive symptom mentioned was only from the non-medalist and or medalists who did not receive um, a gold or silver. But it's not the study was mostly on gold medalists. In fact, it was on swimmers in other parts of the world. So that part was different. A similarity though is that um, the interventions program suggested by the IOC were some of the same interventions and recommendations suggested by the participants here, which include mentorship, continuing formal training in non-sport areas, and yes, a hybrid approach to providing support. So those were some of the things that were similar to other parts of the world, but in terms of uh, differences existed whereby the depressive symptoms were only noted by the non-medalists.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We have another question here from Cornell Lord. And
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm
yes,
seeing it.
yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, you've noticed that there were more female participants than males. Is there a reason for such? Well, even though this is not a quantitative study, what exists in terms of the representation of the population is that you have more male Olympians that have represented, sorry, more female Olympians that have represented the country in track and field. So as a result, I had also more female Olympians. And remember, please note that it's only those who face the starter that I'm talking about, because then the numbers are going to vary from that end. But also, I found it easier to have the females being interviewed. And I do recall one Olympian saying to me, based on their experiences, which by the way were mixed in terms of positive and negative experiences, that I'd be fortunate if I got 10 Olympians who wanted to talk to me. And the truth is, I was not so fortunate. I got 9. And that's
Wow.
because of certain other administrative um, issues that they are having or that they had experienced. And some of them also dealing with unresolved um, trauma.
Mm.
And also some just not wanting to be involved in a research that is of this nature.
And a follow up from Cornell is on the screen.
Okay, this is asking from Cornell if male reaction to not receiving, what were the differences between, well, you know what, I did not look specifically at the different reactions to a male receiving a medal versus a female not receiving it. So I didn't look at the gender differences, but what I found out was that whether or not you're a male or female Jamaican Olympian, when you return without a medal, it's not perceived in a positive light to the actual athlete, because there's a huge sense of disappointment, naturally so too. But it, with the exception of one person who mentioned that even though they did not medal, that still means that they're top 8 in the world. So it's not seen as an accomplishment to the Olympian, whether they're male or female, if they return without a medal. But there are some wins from that because they are still 8th in the world. But again, I guess based on the cultural context and where they're going to return, 8th is not a significant number to us.
Okay.
And
All
the
right. Thank you.
athletes themselves know that.
All right. I think we can take another 2 questions. We have another one from John and then one from Vernetta. Um, what would be the implications for what type of education needs to be given to the citizens of Jamaica to understand and support Olympians?
Okay, so thank you so much for that question. The education would vary, and it doesn't mean that you're softening down the culture, because people will also say that it is from this very pressuring um, and high expectant culture why our athletes and our Olympians are able to do so well. But in the age, and I must also note that even as far back then, I can't remember, just say it closer to 1972 to present. I remember one Olympian saying that they had returned without a medal, and there was a caricature in the Gleaner or in the newspaper at the time with a suitcase, and the suitcase had like immigration officers searching the suitcase, and then the caption read, searching for a medal. And that was way back when. And what exists now, it's more direct because it's open to social media. And so culturally, I don't know in terms of education what can really happen, but it has to be ongoing, that we are more sensitive to the fact that those who represent us at the highest level, they don't want to lose. So don't think that you want to win more than they want to win. But because sports can be unpredictable, and it's a whole combination and series of things that go into the actual winning performance, we have to be a little bit more sensitive. And some of them did suggest that, and support our Olympians more, especially with those comments now in current society, that they be more considerate to the athletes and their journey. And this again is not in terms of them embracing underperformance, but some of the comments can really debilitate an athlete and their ability to prepare again for the next 4 years. So these things are really important. So culturally, in terms of what type of education, I just think over time we have to start to understand the life behind the scenes of an athlete, and remember also athletes are humans. And this, yes, I have to say that because many times we, because of their supernatural capabilities, we sometimes forget, and as a result, we need to be more mindful of these things.
Okay. And I think we have one last question here from Vernetta. Uh, is there a reason for choosing track and field athletes? Do you think the results would be similar for other sport, like team sport?
Thank you. So I'm looking at Olympics. So for as it relates to the Olympics and Jamaica and us producing Olympians, we have mostly track and field Olympians. So that's the only reason really why track and field. And they were the ones who were willing to share their stories. And we would have had more numbers in terms of more persons who would have participated in track and field than any other sport at the Olympics, right? So I am. I want to also hasten that this is just an introductory research, because there are other events. We have now happening World Cup, and we have also World Cup for various sports, different types of sports, and they also experience post championship transition, right? But for this particular research, I was just looking at Olympics, and I was hoping to get other types of Olympians, but it just happened that I ended up only with track and field
Mhm.
Olympians. And I'm not sure what the results would be if it were for a different type of sport, but I know that that needs to be explored. And like I said, we have various types of championships in different types of sports, and there are certain emotional regulation that takes place when you're at a high level. Expectation is great, and then you come back down from that. So yeah, that's something that I'm definitely interested in continuing for various types of sports. So thanks for that question, Vernetta.
All right. Thank you all for your questions. Just another comment from me regarding the whole depressive symptoms that uh, Olympians experience after the games.
Hmm.
We just need to recognize that to simply to make it to the Olympic Games is an accomplishment. So independent of winning a medal or making it to the finals, just qualifying for the Olympic Games is an accomplishment. And I ran some stats on this some time ago, and it's a remarkably low number of persons who are able to even qualify. So we sometimes get caught up in results and looking out for athletes with medals, but it is extremely difficult just to make it to the Olympic Games. So we need to be a little bit more appreciative of the efforts of our athletes. Any last word or comment from you, Dr. Rose, before we conclude the session?
Well, like I said, I am open for further research regarding different types of sport and their post championship transitions, because we really need to ensure that athletes are physically, psychologically, emotionally, all types of alley ready to to compete again. So you compete to compete again, not just to compete at the end and that's it. Because if we don't make certain adjustments, we are doing more harm than good to the people who represent us at the highest level. And I just also want to, in closing, highlight the fact that culturally, based on what I would have found from this research, the Jamaican people are warm and receptive to the juniors, right? That was mentioned, and to
Mhm.
the junior athletes when they don't medal. So when you are going to not acknowledge an athlete who you would have so-called spoiled or received unconditionally with or without a medal when they were younger, and know that they're at the national level as a senior athlete, and they are received with very harsh or poor reception because they did not achieve a goal that you had for them also, because that's important. Some of the Olympians who competed and who were a part of this study didn't necessarily want to medal. They just wanted to see where they were. So the Olympics was a performance indicator for them. And then you, as a collective body, in terms of our culture and country, having the expectation of a medal, those goals are incongruent, and of course we will have fallouts in that regard. So let us be mindful that the goals that you have for athletes who represent your country may not necessarily be the goals that the athletes themselves have for themselves individually. And let us try to be more supportive in all aspects, because they have various needs. Have greater dialogue with them in terms of what they want as appreciation or tangible rewards, because you'd be surprised about that part too. Um, that the rewards and titles that you give them is not necessarily what they want. And so let us be mindful of all those needs and provide a greater supportive environment for them to continue making our flag um, very visible and proud at these national events. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Rose, and thank you to all who have joined and participated, listened, asked questions, etc. Your presence is acknowledged, and we really appreciate the time that you took to join us for this session. And I know some of you joined even when there was a match going on between Germany and Japan. I know we have a lot of German fans here. Uh, and of
To
course,
acknowledge the people
you may
who
be aware
joined. Thank
Germany lost
you.
that match. The ball is round. Very exciting times
Around.
ahead for the next month. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, take care, guys, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.